Where did young women, full of life, disappear to after crossing the threshold of their new luxurious homes following lavish weddings? We are used to seeing happy faces in white lace in old photographs, but the archives hold completely different, chilling stories. Behind the grand facades of mansions in New York and London, tragedies unfolded that were not even whispered about in the most remote rooms. Young wives disappeared into the shadows of corridors, not because of mysticism or ghosts, but under the weight of unbearable social norms and family pressure. Their names were erased from the society columns, and they themselves became pale shadows, locked in golden cages of wealth and etiquette. Watch the video to the end to find out how a glamorous marriage became a life sentence in one's own living room. What if I told you that everything you believed about the romance of the balls of the Age of Splendor was a lie? The glittering receptions described in novels were in fact a tightly organized exchange where beauty and youth were traded for titles and capital. Girls who had been prepared for this moment since birth did not go out into society for pleasure, but to fulfill their sole mission in life. Their dresses, adorned with thousands of beads, were not just outfits, but carefully designed packaging for expensive merchandise on display for all to see. Behind every polite bow and wave of a fan lay the cold calculation of mothers seeking to raise their family's social status at any cost. Despite the abundance of colors and light, the atmosphere in the ballrooms was saturated with tension and fear of making a mistake. One wrong word, one glance that lingered too long, or a dance with the wrong partner could ruin a debutante's reputation forever. The girls stood for hours in uncomfortable corsets, smiling through their fatigue, because they had no right to show weakness. They were required to look flawless, like porcelain dolls, deprived of the right to their own feelings and desires. The competition was fierce, and friends instantly became rivals, ready to do anything for a good match. Mothers and aunts, sitting along the walls on velvet sofas, watched every move closely, like commanders on a battlefield. They evaluated potential suitors not by their character, but by the size of their fortune and position in society. Love in this equation was just a pleasant but optional bonus that was not seriously considered. Marriage of convenience was considered the norm, the foundation of stability on which the entire high society of the time was based. Often a young bride did not even know the man with whom she was to spend her entire life until the moment of her engagement. Preparing the dowry turned into an endless series of fittings, where the girl was spun around in front of the dressmaker's mirrors for hours. The finest silks and laces, ordered from Paris, were supposed to emphasize the status of the future wife of a millionaire or aristocrat. But in these endless meters of fabric, many felt not joy, but the weight of future obligations that fell on their fragile shoulders. Each stitch on the wedding dress seemed to seal a contract in which she had no say. She became part of the interior, a beautiful addition to the mansion, the carriage, and the family jewels. Society dictated that marriage was the highest point of a woman's destiny, after which came cloudless happiness. Novels and magazines fueled this illusion by describing weddings as magical fairy tales with happy endings. No one warned young ladies about what happens after the church doors close and the lights of the celebration go out. They were taught that their only task was to be submissive, beautiful, and fertile, without demanding anything in return. The illusion of choice was perhaps the cruelest deception of that era, forcing people to believe in freedom where there was none. The pressure was so great that refusing a lucrative offer was considered a betrayal of the family's interests and madness. A father could spend a fortune on his daughter's season, expecting a return on his investment in the form of a successful marriage. The girl felt this responsibility keenly, understanding that the future of her brothers and sisters depended on her. The fear of remaining an old maid, superfluous and unnecessary, drove them to the altar, even with those who aroused disgust. It was a conveyor belt of destinies, working flawlessly and ruthlessly, grinding down dreams of true love. I'm very interested to hear your point of view on such traditions. What do you think about how family pressure ruined the lives of young girls for the sake of status? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about the deafening silence that fell upon the house when the last guest left? The first morning as a wife often became a moment of bitter realization and the beginning of deep loneliness. Yesterday's groom, so gallant at the balls, often turned into a cold and distant stranger, busy with his own affairs. For a man, marriage was just a check mark on a list of achievements, a necessary condition for a career and continuing the family line. For a woman, however, it became the only reality from which there was no escape except complete submission. Huge mansions, which from the outside looked like fairy tale palaces, often turned out to be dark and uncomfortable labyrinths inside. The young wife wandered through the enfilades of rooms, where the furniture had been arranged by her husband's grandmother, and nothing could be changed. She felt like a guest in her own home, a foreign element in the established ecosystem of an ancient family. The servants, loyal to the old masters, looked at her with distrust and hidden condemnation, catching every mistake. This feeling of isolation grew stronger every day, turning the gilded stucco on the ceiling into the bars of a dungeon. Husbands often went to their clubs, the stock exchange, or hunting, leaving their wives completely alone for days and weeks at a time. A woman was not supposed to take an interest in her husband's affairs, his finances, or politics. Her world was reduced to embroidery and managing the menu. Intellectual hunger became her constant companion, as serious books were considered harmful to the female mind. Attempts to talk about something important were met with a polite but unyielding wall of indifference or ridicule. She quickly realized that no one was interested in her opinion and that her role was to be a beautiful decoration. In the coldness of Victorian marriages, there was no place for the emotional intimacy that girls who had read novels dreamed of. Marital duties were performed mechanically, often without the slightest hint of tenderness or understanding of female psychology. Many young women who had no idea about the physical side of marriage before the wedding experienced a real shock. This silent suffering accumulated, finding no outlet, and weighed heavily on the psyche. Shame and the inability to discuss their experiences even with their mothers created a vacuum around the newlywed. Gilded Age mansions were built to show off wealth, not to provide comfort and warmth to their inhabitants. Huge fireplaces could not heat the high halls, and drafts swept through the corridors like ghosts of the past. The silence in these houses was palpable, pressing on the ears, interrupted only by the ticking of the grandfather clock. A woman could sit for hours by the window, watching the life of the street to which she no longer belonged. She was separated from the world by heavy velvet curtains that absorbed not only light but also sound. In this atmosphere of absolute isolation and emotional coldness, the psyche began to malfunction. Melancholy, then considered a fashionable illness, was in fact a cry for help from a person locked away. Women would lie for hours in darkened rooms, citing migraines, just so they wouldn't have to see the walls they had grown to hate. But silence and alienation were not the only enemies in these homes. In the next chapter, you will learn about treatment methods that were more frightening than the disease itself. What I am about to show you is banned in 12 countries as a method of treatment, but at the time it was considered the pinnacle of medicine. When a young wife's melancholy and depression became too obvious and began to bother her husband, a doctor was called. The verdict was often predictable and harsh: hysteria, or nervous exhaustion, requiring immediate intervention. The most popular method was the so-called treatment by rest, developed by the renowned physician Silas Weir Mitchell. Under the plausible pretext of caring for her health, the woman was effectively placed in solitary confinement in her own bedroom. The essence of the method was to completely isolate the patient from any physical and, most importantly, intellectual activity. The woman was forbidden to get out of bed, read books, write letters, or even sew or draw. She was instructed to lie motionless for hours, staring at the ceiling or the patterns on the wallpaper in complete silence. It was believed that any mental activity depleted the female body and harmed reproductive function. The doctor and her husband controlled her every breath, turning a grown woman into a helpless infant. During this treatment, she was force-fed excessive amounts of food in order to increase her weight. Women were literally force-fed fatty foods, milk, and cream, ignoring their lack of appetite. Refusal to eat was perceived as a symptom of illness and disobedience, which was suppressed with the harshness of prison guards. The body became loose and heavy, which further tied the unfortunate woman to her hated bed. This physical change exacerbated her feelings of self-loathing and complete loss of control over her own life. The room was often kept in artificial semi-darkness, with heavy curtains drawn even on the sunniest days. The lack of light and fresh air led to even greater apathy and a loss of sense of time. The days merged into an endless gray mass, where the only events were the visits of the nurse with a tray. The woman found herself in sensory deprivation, which could drive even a perfectly healthy person mad. Her world narrowed to four walls and a pattern on the wallpaper, which began to seem alive and threatening. Charlotte Perkins Gilman's famous story, The Yellow Wallpaper, was written about just such an experience, which the writer herself had gone through. She described how the prohibition of creativity and thinking forced the mind to seek escape in hallucinations. Women began to see figures in the shadows, hear voices in the sound of the wind, and lose touch with reality. This was not madness in the medical sense. It was a desperate attempt by the brain to occupy itself with something. But for doctors, such symptoms only serve to confirm the diagnosis of profound hysteria. Click like if you are also struck by the cruelty of methods that were presented as care and welfare. The secret that people pay thousands for is the opportunity to be heard. But these women were sent to a place where screaming was useless. When a young wife did not respond to treatment by rest or became too inconvenient in the city, the next stage followed. She was sent to the waters or to a remote country estate, ostensibly to improve her health in the fresh air. In reality, this was often a veiled exile, a way to get rid of a problematic spouse without resorting to divorce. The country houses we are used to seeing, bathed in sunlight and impressionist paintings, turned into dreary fortresses in winter and autumn. Surrounded by parks that no one could maintain, they stood far from neighbors and social life. There were no balls, no visits, no shops, only endless forests or fields outside the window. Women found themselves in complete isolation, cut off from news, fashion, and communication with their peers. Their husbands usually remained in the city, citing important business or political matters, and visited their sick wives extremely rarely. These visits were short, formal, and tense, more like a prison guard's inspection. He brought scant news, checked the accounts, and left again for the bright life of the metropolis, leaving his wife in silence. She remained alone with a staff of servants, who were often her husband's spies, reporting on her every move. In such a remote place, time flowed differently, stretching into an endless gray thread of identical days and nights. The morning began with silence, the day passed in aimless walks along empty alleys, and the evening ended by the fireplace. The only entertainment was reading the same books from the old library or leafing through the herbarium. The lack of new experiences and stimuli led to a slow degradation of personality and a waning interest in life. Many women tried to find solace in religion or charity among the local peasants, if this was permitted. But the gap between the aristocrat and the common people was too great to find real human warmth there. To them, she was a lady, a creature from another planet whose sorrows they did not understand. This intensified her sense of loneliness. She was a stranger both in her husband's city and here in the rural wilderness. But loneliness was not the only challenge. In the next chapter, you will learn how another formidable force entered the struggle for control over the young wife. How did daughters-in-law cope with the authority of their husbands' mothers? For many young wives, especially those from new money families entering the old aristocratic clans, the main nightmare was not isolation, but living under the same roof as their mother-in-law. During the Gilded Age, matriarchs wielded enormous power within the family hierarchy. The widowed queen of the clan often did not want to cede control to a young and inexperienced rival. The house turned into a battlefield where every day there were positional battles over the keys to the pantry and the order in which dishes were served. A young wife crossing the threshold often found that the position of mistress of the house was already firmly occupied by her husband's mother. She was not allowed to rearrange the furniture, choose flowers for the living room, or hire new servants. Any attempt to bring something of her own to the household was met with an icy stare and the phrase, "That's not how we do things in our family." The girl felt like a perpetual guest, a schoolgirl who had to ask permission for every action. Her mother-in-law controlled not only her daily life, but also her appearance, manners, and social circle. She criticized her dresses, considering them too bright or too modest, too expensive or tasteless. She lectured her on how to hold a cup properly, how to smile at guests, and what to talk about at dinner. This constant criticism, often expressed publicly or in front of servants, undermined the young woman's self-confidence. The conflict was especially acute if the daughter-in-law came from a nouveau riche family, whose money saved her husband's impoverished family. The mother-in-law could treat the girl's vulgar habits with contempt, while not forgetting to spend her dowry. It was a silent confrontation, with money on one side and pride and titles on the other. The young wife understood that she was tolerated only as a gold mine, but would never be accepted as an equal. In this situation, the husband most often took his mother's side or cowardly removed himself from the conflict. For a Victorian man, his mother's authority was unquestionable, and he did not dare to contradict her will. His wife's complaints were perceived as disrespect for her elders and capriciousness, which further alienated the spouses. The woman found herself isolated, caught between her husband's indifference and his mother's tyranny. Lunches and dinners in such homes were held in tense silence, broken only by the clinking of silverware and sharp remarks. The mother-in-law sat at the head of the table, distributing attention and dishes at her discretion. The daughter-in-law sat to the side, trying to be inconspicuous so as not to provoke another outburst of anger or moralizing. The food seemed tasteless, and the luxurious porcelain felt as heavy as stones. The secret that will change your life is that sometimes silence is the loudest cry for help. Victorian and Gilded Age etiquette was not just a set of rules for table manners, but an iron corset that shackled the soul. From childhood, girls were taught that showing true emotions was the height of bad manners and a sign of poor taste. A lady should not raise her voice, laugh loudly, run, and, God forbid, cry in public. This mask of eternal restraint became part of their faces, preventing them from expressing pain, fear, or anger. The main rule was to save face at all costs, even if your world was falling apart. If her husband openly cheated on her, gambled away his fortune, or humiliated her, she was obliged to smile at guests. Complaining to anyone, even close friends, was considered shameful and tantamount to airing dirty laundry in public. A woman had to bear her cross with her head held high, creating the illusion of a perfect family. This monstrous dissonance between inner tragedy and outward glamour tore the psyche apart. Tears were considered a sign of hysteria and weakness, unworthy of a woman of high society. If you wanted to cry, you had to go to your room, close the door, and bite down on a handkerchief so that no one would hear. When she came out for dinner, she had to be fresh, calm, and ready to engage in light conversation. This constant suppression of natural reactions led to psychosomatic illnesses and nervous breakdowns. The body began to rebel against unnatural prohibitions, expressing pain through fainting spells and migraines. But etiquette was only part of the trap. In the next chapter, you will learn how financial dependence turned women into powerless hostages. How did money become chains that could not be broken? Many mistakenly believed that living in luxury meant financial freedom for women of the Gilded Age. In fact, most of them did not have a penny of their own money to spend without accountability. The laws of the time, especially the principle of coverture, effectively deprived married women of property rights. Everything she owned before marriage and everything she received during marriage came under the complete control of her husband. A rich dowry, land, stocks, all of this dissolved into the spouse's capital at the moment of marriage. A woman could bring millions into the family, but she was forced to ask her husband for small change for ribbons or pins. This put her in the humiliating position of a supplicant, completely dependent on the mood and generosity of her husband. Her husband could spend her fortune on horse racing, mistresses, or risky investments, and she had no say in the matter. The lack of her own funds made it virtually impossible to escape from a cruel or indifferent husband. Where could a woman go if she had no cash, no bank account, and no right to work? Society condemned working women, considering labor to be the lot of the lower classes or fallen women. Even if she had an education, she could not use it to earn a living without losing her status completely. The jewelry we see in portraits often legally belonged not to the woman, but to her husband's family. These were family heirlooms, which were given to her for temporary use at balls and receptions. In the event of a conflict or divorce, The husband could take them back at any time, leaving his wife with nothing. The sparkle of the diamonds was deceptive. They were government-owned jewelry, inventory numbers of the family museum. Economic helplessness forced women to endure any humiliation, betrayal, and even beatings. The fear of ending up on the street without any means of subsistence was stronger than pride and resentment. They clung to marriage as if it were a lifeline, even if that lifeline was dragging them down. The golden cage was securely locked with a financial key that lay in her husband's vest pocket. Behind the thick curtains of Victorian bedrooms lay another dark secret that was strictly forbidden to talk about. Young wives, blooming and healthy before the wedding, often began to fade away from mysterious ailments shortly after their wedding night. Doctors threw up their hands, muttering about female weakness, anemia, or nervous fever. But the real reason often lay in the fact that husbands brought terrible souvenirs from their wild bachelor lives: venereal diseases. Syphilis and gonorrhea were a real scourge of that era, a hidden epidemic of high society. Men who frequented brothels and kept mistresses before and during marriage infected their innocent wives. For a woman, this was not only a physical tragedy, but also a terrible moral blow if she guessed the cause. But more often than not, she remained in the dark, suffering from pain and the destruction of her body without understanding what was happening. Diagnoses were falsified to save the family's honor and the reputation of a respected gentleman. Women were told that they had problems with their lungs, heart, or digestion, and were fed useless or even harmful medicines. She slowly faded away, suffering from inflammation, pain, and infertility, which was a common consequence of such infections. And it was she who was blamed for not being able to give her husband an heir, which added guilt to her physical suffering. Mercury and arsenic, which were used to treat such diseases at the time, were themselves poisons that slowly killed patients. Hair fell out, skin turned gray, teeth crumbled, a beauty turned into a ghost in a matter of months. This decline was attributed to fatal destiny or a weak constitution, extolling the tragic beauty of the dying woman. No one dared to say aloud that her own marital bed was killing her. Mental disorders caused by the late stages of syphilis were also interpreted as female madness. Neurosyphilis led to hallucinations, paranoia, and memory loss, which fit perfectly into the picture of hysteria. The woman was locked up in a sanatorium or attic, hiding her shameful madness from the eyes of the world. Her husband, meanwhile, accepted condolences as a sufferer bearing a heavy cross. The secrecy surrounding the disease created a wall of alienation between the spouses, full of lies and fear. Knowing the truth, the husband often felt not remorse, but irritation toward his wife, who had become a living reminder of his sins. He began to avoid her, despise her, and ultimately isolate her. His sick wife became a burden, preventing him from enjoying life and spending money. Even if life became unbearable, divorce in the Victorian era and the Gilded Age was virtually impossible. It was a nuclear weapon that destroyed a woman's reputation, social connections, and future. Marriage could only be dissolved through a complex, expensive, and public court case, requiring proof of adultery or extreme cruelty. But even success in court meant complete social death for a woman. A divorced woman instantly became an outcast, a pariah, shut out of respectable homes. Her name was crossed off guest lists, and old friends crossed the street to avoid greeting her. She became marked, suspicious, a figure dangerous to the morals of society. Inviting her to parties was considered bad form. She could compromise the reputation of the hostess. After a divorce, a man usually retained his position, clubs, and friends, getting off with only a slight taint of scandal. Women, on the other hand, lost everything: status, respect, and often their children. The law almost always left the children with their father, considering him the sole legal guardian. Mothers could be deprived of the right to even see their sons and daughters, which was the most terrible punishment. A woman who was financially divorced often found herself on the brink of poverty if she did not have her own family support. Alimony was rare and often meager, its payment depending on the goodwill of the ex-husband. Women accustomed to luxury ended their lives in cheap boarding houses, selling their last pieces of jewelry. The fall from the top of the social ladder was painful and irreversible. The stories of these women rarely make it into school history textbooks. They remain in the shadow of great events and male achievements. Traces of them can only be found in old letters found in attics or in sad eyes on faded daguerreotypes. Family archives were often purged. Inconvenient relatives were erased from memory, their portraits taken down from the walls or sent to the basement. Relatives preferred to forget about the crazy aunt or unfortunate cousin so as not to spoil the ideal image of the family. We see only the outer shell of the Gilded Age, the glittering palaces of Newport, dresses from Worth, tiaras from Cartier, but we rarely think about the human cost of this splendor, paid for by women's destinies. Behind every grand ball were hours of loneliness. Behind every diamond necklace, coldness and alienation. It was an era when things were valued more than people, and reputation was more important than happiness. The myth of the mad woman in the attic became a literary trope, but it grew out of the terrible reality of thousands of women. Those who did not fit into the rigid framework were broken and hidden away, declared insane. Their potential, their talents, their ability to love were sacrificed to the idol of propriety. How many unwritten books, unpainted pictures, and undiscovered discoveries are buried in these golden cages? Today, walking through museum estates, we admire the interiors, not hearing the silent cries of their former inhabitants. We are shown the boudoir as a place of rest, without mentioning that it was often a solitary confinement cell. We see a wedding dress, but we do not know that for its owner it became the shroud of her hopes. It is important to learn to see beyond the gloss of history to the real people with their pain and tragedies. We have opened the heavy door to the past to see not the glitter of gold, but the fates of living women hidden behind it. These stories are frightening in their hopelessness, but they also make us appreciate what we have today more keenly. The tragedy of the lost brides of the Gilded Age is a constant reminder that wealth does not equal happiness, and that outer beauty can hide deep pain. What do you think about these fates? Which story touched you the most, or perhaps reminded you of something personal? Suggest topics for future videos in the comments, telling us what other hidden pages of women's history you would like to learn about. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new journeys into the mysteries of the past.